Got a feeling I'm high on believing.
Alright, so I just got back from seeing the new Serenity movie. I mean, the Futurama movie. I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy. Really, this is kind of a... Even from the trailers, I remember seeing it in theater, I remember thinking, like, this is probably the closest to a live-action Futurama movie that we'll ever get. Because it's just a bunch of assholes in space having big, wacky adventures. This has been a long time coming. This has been the kind of the one that everybody has been keeping their eyes on, so to speak, because it's such a big, risky move for Marvel to make a movie out of a comic series that is essentially a list of C-listers. Not many people have heard of Guardians of the Galaxy. It's not really that big of a thing. And I know that's inviting people into the comments to correct me, but to be perfectly honest, Guardians of the Galaxy is not a huge mainstream, well-known comic series. So for Marvel to dig this deep back is a big gamble. So we've all been kind of waiting and seeing if it's going to pay off. If it's going to be a big blunder, we're just going to laugh at them or what. And now it's finally here. After all this time, it's finally out, and it was worth every minute that we waited for it. Guardians of the Galaxy is I love this freaking movie, like, from the get-go. James Gunn, the director, typically does very small scope movies. He did Slither, which is a horror movie, and then he did Super, which I haven't actually seen myself. He's done a few other things, but those are the ones that he's known probably a lot for. But they're very small in budget, very small in scope, and this is apparently what happens when you give him tons of money, and you get a movie that has such a striking visual appeal to it that you can be watching Star-Lord, in the headgear and the suit, trudging against the rain, or an opening shot of when they fly into this place called Nowhere. You can almost see the concept art like being brought to life. You can almost see the rough sketches of how the scene's going to play out. It's fantastic. It captures your attention. It holds it for the entire duration of the movie. Well, except for one exception. We'll get to that. And then it'll go into a dance sequence. You've got Chris Pratt playing Star-Lord, who is frickin' ripped, by the way, now. He definitely worked hard for this movie, and it pays off, because he looks great. And he pulls off the part perfectly, honestly. He's proven himself as not just being a funny man. He's not just the waiter or whatever in Parks and Recreation. He's now, which is great. Zoe Saldana, we already knew she was a powerhouse and she's going places. Green is the new blue, I guess, because she makes that look good too. Dave Bautista. Dave Bautista is a wrestler. That right there should tell you everything you need to know about his general acting ability. Yet he is absolutely perfect as Drax. The character Drax is very literal, 100% literal. He does not understand the concept of metaphors or sarcasm or similes or anything like that. So when people will say something to him, he takes it 100% literal, which leads to a lot of really good humor. But he says his lines with such straight-faced sincerity that it makes it's 10 times funnier than it would have been with anyone else. Strangely enough, Vin Diesel, like, he only has one real line in the whole movie, but you hear it and you're kind of like, it's, you don't really hear Vin Diesel in there. If you didn't know it was Vin Diesel, you wouldn't guess it. But then when you hear him yelling and shouting and screaming, suddenly you can hear it again. Like, you can kind of tell. It's very bizarre. Bradley Cooper, I'm glad that, him playing as Rocket, I'm glad that they dialed back his accent. Rocket in the past has been known for having a very, very thick Australian accent. And that can make it a little difficult to understand what he's saying sometimes, especially when he starts using lingo and slang. And I'm glad that there's hints of it, but it's severely dialed down. This movie, I made a joke about Serenity, this being a Serenity movie, but in all honesty, it does play out a lot like Firefly. The characters are all flawed, yet still three-dimensional. They're completely 100% believable, and the way they bounce off of each other has a really genuine Joss Whedon feel to it. You know, it's shot differently and it's paced differently than a Joss Whedon movie. It's much more fast paced. It's much more accessible than the Avengers is. Especially since you don't really need to know anything going into this to really understand it. A couple parts you might get lost, but if you keep up with the lingo that they're using, which can be a little overwhelming at first, I think the biggest drawback for the movie is that they don't take a whole... They really throw you in the deep end when it comes to the language of the movie. It reminded me of John Carter, how they would just kind of throw around the silly names and words of all the planets and aliens and creatures and regions and governments and branches and all this stuff, and you just kind of have to take it all in. It's not nearly as overwhelming as John Carter, but it starts to get close to that in the beginning, and then it eases up a little bit. They drop they focus on the most important ones the most. I think really, yeah, because it's such a strong character thing, the movie relies on these actors portraying their parts individually and bouncing off each other. They all have amazing chemistry, and that really is kind of the mainstay of the movie. It's got heart to it in the appropriate places, and it's very witty. It knows when to take a moment and have a character do a pratfall, or it knows when to have the character point out something or something like that. It is a very, very clever script. The exception is the villains, and this is starting to become... No, actually, you know what? Let's not pretend. This is not starting to become a problem with Marvel movies. This has been a problem with Marvel movies for a while now, where the villains fall by the wayside, either on their own merits or just in comparison to how good the heroes are depicted. The villain, villains, especially in this, I already talked about the scenes where the protagonists are interacting with each other. They have great chemistry, bouncing off each other, it's written well, it's paced well, shots are perfect, directed well, okay? Then the movie has scenes where the villains are interacting with each other. It's so blatantly obvious that they didn't know how to handle the villains interacting with each other in this movie that they really try and just get the scene over as quickly as possible. There's a scene where the big stupid hammer villain is shouting at Thanos, who has his back to him, and one of Thanos' spokesman guys, who is in the Avengers, is shouting back at him, kind of speaking for Thanos. But they are overlapping their dialogue so much that it's almost impossible to keep up with the conversation. And it's done so quickly that it feels like they were just trying to get the scene over with. I don't know if that's just sheer laziness. I think what it probably more likely is that with the protagonists, they have dimensions. There is meat there that you can work with. You can have them relate to each other in ways based on their personal philosophies or their goals or whatever. The villains in this have pretty much the same motive, the same viewpoints. The only difference they have is their names. So there is nothing for them to bounce off of each other. So my theory is that the villains just flat out are not as interesting as the heroes. So having two boring characters sharing a scene results in a really boring scene. And I think, honestly, that's the only real huge nitpick I had with them, or huge problem that I had with the movie, is that whenever it would break away from the main protagonists were so well done and pulled off that the other parts of the movie, the parts of the movie where they weren't in it, kind of suffered by comparison. I mean, there's scenes with like Meryl Streep and John C. Reilly and members of the Nova Corps that were just fine. They just don't particularly stand out either. Sorry, I a huge soda. I'm a little burpy, but yeah, ultimately, Guardians is now officially, Marvel can just make any movie they want now. If Guardians takes off, as well as any of the other like post Iron Man movies did, then they'll do just fine. They can reach into the deepest, darkest recesses of the Marvel library and make whatever they want. Which is unfortunate considering the post-credit scene of this movie. It's pretty much common knowledge now that when you go to see a Marvel movie, you wait through the credits until the end. This is the exception. You can completely skip this. It has, not only does it have nothing to do with the plot or with building up the next movie, but it's a joke that falls completely flat. It's a joke that they didn't know how to tell. They just assumed that the setup was enough of a joke. It's so shoddily done that it really, when it happened and a certain thing was brought up, the entire audience was silent. There were crickets in the entire audience because no one was laughing. There might have been some animosity in the theater, I don't know, but the point is that nobody got it. Nobody gets that joke. That's purely just, it's a joke that's just for Marvel people, but it's not funny to Marvel people. I almost kind of regret seeing Guardians now because the post-credit scene almost kind of suggests like, hey, now that we've got your money and you've proven that you like weird stuff, we could do this next. And it's like, oh no, but I don't want that. No one wants that. And the effect for it is really, 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 really shitty. So, yeah, this is one of the few times where, honestly, give it 3 days and then you'll see it on YouTube or something like that. Honestly, it's probably already up on the whatsafterthecredits.com. You can probably just look it up there. Don't even bother. But do bother with the movie because holy shit, this is probably one of my new favorite things now. Where does it fall in the Marvel like chronology as far as like quality goes? Well, it's a hell of a lot better than Thor 2, mainly because I will remember Guardians of the Galaxy, and I don't hardly remember anything from Thor 2. It's better than Iron Man 3, I will say that. Better than the Avengers? Probably. I don't know if I liked it more than Captain America 2, though. My initial reaction is yes, but I wanna sleep on it a little bit. I wanna sleep on it and wait and see how I feel about it in the morning. See if I might just be riding on a high of my expectations being met and exceeded. So I don't know, but I do feel confident saying it's better than Thor 2. It's better than Iron Man 3. Might be better than Avengers. It's definitely, like I said, more accessible than the Avengers. So I say go see it, especially if you want to break from superhero movies, but still kind of want the Marvel quality. That's pretty much it. I think the only other thing that I wanted to add was that Nova. I wouldn't anticipate the Nova Corps being a mainstay in the forthcoming Marvel movies, because the last time that they tried doing a superhero space police movie, it was the Green Lantern, and we all remember how that turned out. So I don't know that any studio is going to bite the bullet for a Nova Corps movie, but yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy gets a shining approval. I can't recommend it enough. It's probably one of the most fun things you'll see in the theater this summer, or this year in general. So I'm done. Honestly, if you were already wanting to see it, you don't need my recommendation. You were already going to go see it. But if you're on the fence, give it a shot. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised because it's very different from other Marvel movies so far. Till then, guys,